those of you that have made it and stayed by for this very important topic. These are things that we need to know for our own life and a lot of times to be able to help others. So we're not many, but the topic is important. And we can double it up by sharing with others what we learned today. You will never go through life without encountering someone dealing with this. You will never go through it. And sometimes our family members close to us are dealing with things like these and in our family. And sometimes we just don't even know it. Don't even know it. And it's in the back of the minds of so many people. And sometimes they don't show it, but it's in the back of their minds as an option. So we need to, this is such an important subject. I wish more people would have stayed for it. And I know that some people, because we said we're going to put it online, maybe some people said, hey, we're going to go home and lay down and put some pajamas on and watch it. But here's where we'll be able to ask all the questions and things like that. So let's bow our heads in prayer and we can start. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your blessings, and we thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here today and to deal with this very important subject. We ask that you may lead us, that you may be here with us, Lord. In the name of Jesus, amen.
All right. Thank you, Pastor, for giving us the opportunity to address such an important topic. And good afternoon, church. I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce my colleague, Aisha Lomas. Aisha Lomas is a licensed mental health counselor. She graduated from Nova Southern University with a master's degree in mental health counseling. Aisha has been practicing in the field of mental health for the past 6 years. She works in private practice in community mental health. She's currently working with individuals in treatment centers who have severe mental health challenges and substance addiction challenges. Suicidality is an area of specialization for her. Aisha has a deep understanding of how to assess for suicidality, warning signs, and risk factors. She has confidently used treatment intervention to help this population, as it is important to be able to support someone who is facing such crisis. Again, church, please join me in welcoming Aisha Lomas.
Okay, this works. Mic check, mic check. Okay. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Dr. Jasmine. Thank you, guys, for having me here today to talk about such a sensitive topic. And evidently, you're here for a reason, and so I hope that you will benefit from our presentation today. And at the end, we will definitely have a Q&A, and you may be supported throughout that process. Once again, thank you. And I truly want to acknowledge the fact that suicidality is a sensitive topic. There's also a lot of stigma associated to the topic. However, suicidality is real for many people. Also, we need to talk about suicide. Why? Because talking about suicide decreases suicide. A lot of people buy into the stigma that talking about it will encourage someone to complete suicide. And we have to be mindful, too, of the language that we use. So you will hear me say complete. I won't say committed, okay? Suicide is related to mental health, and mental illness does not discriminate. Okay, so what's our objective today? Our objective today is to increase the awareness to educate individuals about suicidality. So we're going to talk about it. The first slide said, let's talk about suicide. Like I said, I'm going to be sensitive about this topic because I understand that there are people who have been impacted, so we want to be mindful of that. However, it is important to talk about it because we shy away from talking about it. But the more we educate individuals, the more we talk about it and learn about it and understand its association to mental illness, you will realize that you can support yourself or someone else, okay? We have prevention methods, we have post-vention methods, and we have treatment methods, okay? So today, individuals will learn what suicidality is. Individuals will learn the stigma, how it affects individuals, and how they struggle. Most of the times, people are so afraid of how others may perceive them, and so that deters them from going out to get the help that they need. We'll also learn that individuals will learn that it is okay to speak boldly. So I would like for everybody to leave here today understanding not to shy away from speaking about it, but speak boldly, because you never know. You may be able to help someone. Okay, so individuals will learn how to recognize warning signs and risk factors, and we'll talk about these things. Individuals will learn about the nature of suicidality. Sometimes people go through moments where they're having suicidal thoughts. Sometimes they go through moments where they're not having it. Sometimes people are triggered by something and they'll have suicidal thoughts. Sometimes suicide was modeled to them. A lot of people are not able to cope through some of the things that they're coping through. And so suicide becomes a solution for them. So we want to be able to educate individuals. We want to be able to support individuals so that suicidality is not the solution. So we'll learn, like I said, of the nature. And one of the things with suicidality, it has a fluctuating nature. So that means one moment that person is okay, and then another moment they're not. But we have to keep our eyes open. We'll also learn about facts and myths associated to suicidality. There are a lot of facts out there, and we want to stick to the facts. There are a lot of myths out there. We want to debunk them. And we'll learn how to seek support, and we'll also learn how to provide support. Okay, so suicide is a public health crisis. And one life lost is one life too many, okay? We want to get in our minds that we can support someone, and we want to get in our minds that if we need support, the support is out there, we need to be bold to go seek that support, okay? Because one life lost is one life too many. I'm of the philosophy that we want zero suicide. I know that's pretty ambitious, but that's where I stand, okay? And I want you to join in with me on that too, all right? So suicide is a serious public health problem that can have long-lasting effects on individuals, families, and communities. However, the good news is that suicide is preventable. Preventing suicide requires strategies at all levels of society. So that means it requires you and I, okay? This includes prevention and protective strategies for individuals, families, and communities. Thankfully, you have me here today in the church, and I will say that I believe that the church, we should equip ourselves to be first responders. And as we go through our slides, you will understand a little bit more. So I'm thankful to be able to be in a community today to share this information with you so that we can support each other. Okay, so this includes prevention and protective strategies for individuals, families, and communities. Everyone can prevent suicide, everyone. By learning the warning signs, promoting prevention, increasing resilience, and just having that commitment that we're gonna make some social changes, okay? Okay, so what is suicide? I don't know if anybody had a chance to stop and think about it, but I'm just happy to be able to be speaking about it today. Like I said, it's a sensitive topic, but it's a reality for many, and many people shy away from talking about it. But research has revealed, and working with individuals in a therapeutic setting, we've seen that talking about it is helpful. And we have been able to support individuals in treatment settings and with evidence-based treatments not to complete suicide. So suicide is death caused by injuring oneself with the intent to die. A suicide attempt is when someone harms themselves with any intent to end their life, but they do not die as a result of their actions. So we're going to explore understanding it a little bit more, because many factors can increase the risk for suicide or protect against it. Suicide is connected to other forms of injury and violence. I know that sometimes just not having an understanding, you know, and when we hear of someone taking their own life, it's hard, but I want you to understand the connection with mental illness, and I also want you to understand the connection with the inability to be able to cope or to solve problems, okay? So, for example, people who have experienced violence, including child abuse, bullying, or sexual violence, have a higher suicide risk. Being connected to family and community support and having easy access to health care can decrease suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So that last sentence, that's what we call protective factors. And that's something that we look for when we want to help individuals. And like I stated earlier, faith, church, that's a protective factor. And so that's why it's important that I'm standing here today and that you have me here today and I have your ears and you can take the information out there today and be that first responder. Because faith, instilling hope, supporting someone, it is a protective factor, okay? Okay. It's also important to challenge your beliefs. I know everybody has a different view, but today I hope that the information that I share with you will be helpful, okay? And you'll be able to have a different perspective, a healthy perspective, a perspective based on facts, okay? So what are your beliefs? I challenge clinicians with this also, because whatever our beliefs are, that's what we're bringing into the setting in that moment. And that can determine whether or not we're going to be helpful or not. So I want you to challenge your beliefs for a moment. Think about it. Why do people kill themselves? Okay. There's hopelessness, all right. So human to human connection. There's something in us. And if we're the faith community and somebody is lacking hope, when they're down, we can be that hope for them in that moment, okay? All right. Is it ever okay to die by suicide? Okay. So However you feel, that's what you're bringing in that moment. Okay? If you think somebody, oh, if they want to kill themselves, oh, well, I can't stop them. You won't support them. But if you feel that it's never okay and that there is hope, you're going to bring that in that moment. You're going to be that strength to that person. You're going to seek support on behalf of that person who is low in that moment. So this is why I'm challenging your beliefs, and I want you to be aware of this, okay? So can we, as a community, as a faith community, as another human being, can suicides be prevented? Okay, all right. So that's what you're bringing in each encounter, okay? You never know. Someone may come to you and express something to you, and it might shock you, but I just want to help you and prepare you because it's a reality for many. The rates are high, and we as the church, we need to stand as a first responder, okay? Okay, so like I said, mental health is real. Thank you for having me here today to talk about mental health. We as a church must have an awareness of what others are going through mentally, emotionally, with thought-wise. Whatever the struggles are, we need to have an understanding so that we can provide that support. And let's just remember that all of us are subject. Remember that mental health, suicidality, it doesn't discriminate, okay? So it's just another form of disease, but it is affecting our brains. And the brain is the physical aspect of us. But we have a soul also, okay? Where our thoughts, our emotions, and our desires are affected. And so we put that with mental health also. I can't see your thoughts. I can't see your emotions. I can't see your desires, but they're affected every day. You know them. Those are the ones you keep away from others, whether they're good or whether they're bad, right? I'm a counselor. I get to hear about these thoughts. I get to hear about these desires. I get to hear about these feelings in the counseling sessions. I get to validate them because they're real. And I'm giving that person that opportunity to talk about something that makes them shy or ashamed or feel guilty, or they want to be accepted, or they want to learn better ways of doing certain things. But because we judge people and we criticize people, we don't get to support them. So, like I said, tap into that human side where you have thoughts, you have feelings, you have desires. Not every day they feel good. Not every day we feel good, right? But the world tells us to perform. The world doesn't want to hear about our negative emotions and what we're going through. So we've been conditioned to perform. And so what do? We suppress what we're really feeling about something. Our society has taught us not to talk about these things, and so that increases our stress response, and we're not supported. And over time, these things present as mental illness. And unfortunately, there are a lot of factors to support that. And I'm talking about genetic factors, I'm talking about trauma, I'm talking about stressors, psychosocial stressors, meaning just life, little things that's just boggling you down. Where do people go for support? So I'll encourage you to tap into that human side and let us understand each other and give each other that space to be able to talk about things that's bothering them, talk about feelings. Let's not have that expectation that everything is going to be all right or everything should be all right, or because I want you to be all right in this moment, be all right. No, let's give each other that opportunity to talk about something that's bothering us. Let's give each other that opportunity to talk about how we feel. We're not going to always feel all right, okay? So, so our mental health struggles real. Are they real? Yes. They are. Okay, all right. Keep that in mind. Do Christians suffer with emotional and mental health problems? They do? Yes. Really? Yes. Why? How is that? How is that Christians suffer? Huh? We're different? We're different from the world? Oh, so you're saying Christians have problems? Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah? Yes. But I thought we prayed. Okay, it helps. All right, okay, good. All right, so I like this. I like the mindset here. How this is viewed impacts how we treat mental health and the congregants, each other. So this is good that you guys are aware that not because we're Christians mean that we're exempt and we don't have problems, okay? There is a disease out there, all right, that we've all been impacted by from the book of Genesis. All right, so I always want you to think about your perspective of mental health and your role as a first responder in the church, and also understanding that faith, scriptures, they are very helpful, okay? Alrighty, so let's talk a little bit about the disease and the research that's out there. And I took this from the CDC, okay? So suicide rates increased 30% between 2000 to 2018, and it declined in 2019 and 2020. Suicide is a leading cause of death in the United States, with 45,979 deaths in 2020. So this is about one death every 11 minutes. So I think I've been standing up here now for about a little over 11 minutes, right? So it's probably somebody completed suicide. The number of people who think about or attempted suicide is even higher. So we'll talk about the difference, with somebody having thoughts of suicide. And there's a difference with a thought, the intention, and a plan. All right, so the number of people who think about or attempt suicide is even higher. In 2020, an estimated 12.2 million American adults seriously thought about suicide, and 3.2 million planned a suicide attempt, and 1.2 million attempted it. So here they're saying that it affects all ages. It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, I've heard younger than 10 today talk about wanting to complete suicide. So that's why we as the first responders, we really need to be aware and we need to be out there. In 2020, suicide was among the top 9 leading causes of death for people ages 10 through 64. So suicide was the second leading cause of death for people all ages, 10 through 14 and 25 to 34. Second leading cause of death, guys. Keep that in mind. All right. So research reveals that some groups have higher suicide rates than others, and the reason is because of race, ethnicity, and other factors such as where someone lives. So by race and ethnicity, the groups that with the highest rates were the non-Hispanic American Indian, Alaska Native, and non-Hispanic white populations. Other Americans with higher than average rates of suicide our veterans, people who live in rural areas, and workers in certain industries and occupation like mining and construction. Young people who identify as LGBT have higher rates of suicidal thoughts and behavior compared to their peers who identify as heterosexual. Okay, so here's a quick little picture of what the statistics look like. And today we have the 988 suicide crisis lifeline. And you can call or you can text that number anytime. And somebody who's trained, a trained crisis counselor, will be available to support individuals who call. All right, let's go over some facts and let's go over the myth. Myth 1, suicide only affects individuals with a mental health condition. Yes. All right, so the fact is that many individuals with mental illness are not affected by suicidal thoughts, and not all people who attempt or die by suicide have mental illness. Relationship problems and other life stressors such as criminal, legal matters, persecution, eviction, loss of home, death of a loved one, or devastating or debilitating illness, trauma, sexual abuse, rejection, and recent or impending crisis are also associated with suicidal thoughts and attempts. Depression is strongly linked to suicidality, but it's not the only factor. So sometimes, if somebody's struggling with depression or debilitating pain, a terminal illness, sometimes they will think about suicide a lot more often than others. Sometimes an individual could be just going about their merry life and heard a tragic news that they just lost all their life's earning, and the first thing that comes to their mind is to take their lives. So not everyone who suffers from a mental illness completes suicide. Okay, this is a big one, and this is where a lot of the clinicians, too, that I work with, they have been trained because, unfortunately, a lot of people think that the more they talk about suicide, well, we're going to encourage somebody to complete suicide, but that's so not true, and this is the reason why I am participating with helping individuals to become more aware, to not be shocked, but to be equipped and to be ready to support someone. No, talking about suicide actually decreases suicidality, okay? There is a widespread stigma associated with suicide, stigma, that fear attached, associated with suicide, and as a result, many people are afraid to speak about it. But I say, let's talk about it, and let's be bold, okay? We have faith, so we can talk to others and instill faith in others, all right? So talking about suicide not only reduces the stigma, but also allows individuals to seek help, rethink their opinions, and share their story with others. We all need to talk more about it. And think about it. If somebody comes to you and they tell you that this is what they've been experiencing, I'm sure they're experiencing some of the stigma, about it. It's hard for them to share this. But if they're sharing it with you, think about it. Does that mean that they're seeking support and they really want to die? They want help. They don't want to die. Okay? Remember I talked about the nature of suicidality? Individuals who experience the struggle, for whatever the reason may be, there is some ambivalence with suicidality. So what that means is that there's a part of them that is suffering. Remember earlier I talked to you about thoughts and emotions and going through things in life. Some people go through some things. Some people have experienced nothing but trauma, all right? And so there's a part of them that's experiencing some emotional pain that they don't have the coping skills to bring them out of that. But there's a part of them also that wants to live. So that's the ambivalence. So keep that in mind. So they're struggling. Unfortunately, if they don't get the support that they need, some of them will complete suicide. And that's what we don't want. We want to be able to support individuals who are struggling, all right? Because there's a part of them that wants to live, and there's a part of them that just can't stand that pain anymore. But they don't want to die. They just don't know what to do with this pain, all right? Okay, so let's debunk some of these myths. Debunking these common myths about suicide can hopefully allow individuals to look at suicide from a different angle, one of understanding and compassion. Keep that in mind. Compassion for an individual who is internally struggling. Remember those internal processes? Only you know. I don't know. Others don't know. And remember, we live in a world that tells us to put out our best. And so what do? We suppress what's going on. And then that's not how we were designed. Emotions must be expressed. If I tell you a joke in here, you're going to laugh. But society says it's socially acceptable, that behavior. But if something made you very sad in here, what would you do? Hold back from crying because you got to put out your best. So think about each time when you repress and you're holding back those negative emotions and you don't express them. And you were designed to express them because crying, I'll tell you, it's cathartic. And men and women cry, all right? Yes, it's important. It's cathartic. It's healing. You were designed that way. Get it out. Exactly. Society conditions us. So we have to now tap into the true us. What's going on with us? Because are you acting out of what society says you're supposed to be like, or you're paying attention to what's really going on the inside and what's going on in your world? So just keep that in mind, okay? All right, so if individuals look at suicide from a different angle of understanding and compassion for an individual who is internally struggling, because maybe they are struggling with a mental illness, or maybe they are under extreme pressure and do not have healthy coping skills or a strong support system. So all of us are built with a different level of coping. Our coping threshold is different. Some of us can go through some things and we're pretty resilient. Some of us, not so, okay? So I may go through something and you go through a similar thing, but your response is different. However, that doesn't mean that we can't apply or learn new coping skills to help us to process and go through these challenges. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the stigma. It's a mark that denotes a shameful quality in the individual, or a quality that is considered to be shameful in a certain individual. Now, like I said, we are conditioned to put out our best, all right? Shame is a real emotion, and we're gonna feel ashamed at times. Okay, I say shame has its purpose. Let it be its little warning sign in that moment, but don't live through shame. Don't live through it. Recognize it for what it is, but don't live through it, because what happens is if you're living through shame, it worsens over time, okay? And it just causes more stress, and it can increase mental illness. And so you got to think about Are you performing for someone? Does the value of that person's opinion about you matter that much that you're so ashamed and you'll hide? So I'm actually helping you guys to think and reconstruct the way you think and view things, because you never know if you're under the power of shame, and shame is not helpful, okay? All right. Social stigma. So prejudicial attitudes and discriminating behavior directed towards individuals with mental health problems as a result of the psychiatric label they have been given. So a lot of people come to treatment, and Dr. Jasmine can agree with me on this one. People are experiencing mental health problems, but they are so ashamed of what other people would think about them if you say that they have this disease and it has a label on it. And so many times people will refuse that diagnosis because they're more worried about what society thinks about them. And we try to educate individuals. You are not the label. Switch the perspective. You're not the label. Pretty much it's just saying, okay, what we have seen is that these symptoms present, probably from a certain age, with severity, duration, and so we're going to call it that. We need to know that because we need to know how to treat individuals. So let's be sensitive and compassionate, because individuals will shy away from getting the help that they need, or even assisting family members with the help that they need just because of a mental health diagnosis. And one of the things we try to tell people is that your mental health and the way your brain functions is not any different from when you go to the heart doctor or the kidney doctor and they say, okay, this is the disease and this is the medication that you need. So we try to support individuals with that kind of awareness, because people are very ashamed, like I said, of the stigma, how they're being perceived by others because of a diagnosis. All right, so the perceived stigma, which is internalizing by the mental health sufferer of their perceptions of discrimination. So that's their own little struggle that they're going through, but they're worried about how they're being perceived, and that will prevent them from getting the help that they need. So just keep this in mind, because we want to always be compassionate, and we don't want to treat individuals with a mental health diagnosis in a discriminatory manner, okay? All right. So again, asking someone about suicide may plant the idea in their minds. This is a stigma associated. Suicide people are fully intent on dying. No, that's not true. Everyone who dies by suicide is depressed. No, that's not true. A sudden improvement in emotional state after a suicide attempt or a depressive period indicates the suicide risk is over. No, we talked about the fluctuating nature, all right? Suicide is selfish or immoral. I've heard that many times. People think, oh, that's just so selfish of them. But we have to be compassionate. We have to listen. We have to understand what somebody is going through for them to want to do that, right? And since we know that it's preventable and we can support individuals, we can help to decrease those numbers. So the perceived stigma can affect feelings of shame and can lead to poorer treatment outcomes, because sometimes people just won't acknowledge it and they won't go seek help because they are more afraid of the shame associated and what others would think about them, or just having a diagnosis. All right, so the reality of suicide in the church. It happens. Unfortunately, it happens. And so this is why it's important that we are in touch with each other, all right? So suicide has been historically condemned by the Christian faith. This is a fact, and rightfully so, because the Bible is clear. You shall not murder. So we have, our beliefs, our religious beliefs, but in the past, these beliefs prevented us from helping others. And the reason is simple. We know life is sacred. The fact that each and every one of us was created in the image of God gives each and every one of us infinite worth and value. So that's why it becomes such a shocker, when you hear these things. But it's a reality. So how can we decrease this? How can we support others? So taking upon ourselves to end our lives, it's the ultimate act of defiance against God, for life is his and his alone to give and to take. So I get it. I get why we're like, how could that be? So the taking of a life is showing contempt for God and his image. It's not ours to do it's not ours to do with as we please. So this I share because we keep these things in mind, but we also utilize the compassion and the hope and what faith can do to help others while they're having these struggles and these thoughts and they think that this is the way. Another thing, too, I want to share with you is that the way our brain functions, we have an emotional brain. There's a part of our brain that controls our emotions, and that part of the brain is the first part of the brain to start functioning from childhood, okay? So if you think about it, children, babies, they're communicating through what? Crying, all right? So that's their language. They're telling you that. They're communicating something. Okay. All right, so they don't know how to talk to you. They don't know how to talk. Do they know how to rationalize? Okay. So that emotional part of the brain is what is developed first. And our brains are not fully developed until we are about 21. So do you notice that there is a difference in the judgment of a 2-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 14-year-old, 18-year-old? Is there a difference in the judgment? Okay. So our brains are developing from here, the brain stem, and as we grow older, so this is the emotional brain, and as we grow older, then the prefrontal cortex is developed. And so this part of our brain is where we control focus, the ability to rationalize, inhibit, like I said, concentration, thinking clearly. So if this part of our brain is overstimulated, and a lot of things can overstimulate that part of the brain. First of all, remember, that's the first part of the brain that's developed. And that's the part of the brain that's sensing the world. It can tell, okay, is this a threat? Is this a safe place? So we call that your fight or flight system. And it's determining whether or not you're in a safe place and how you're going to survive in this world. Individuals who are traumatized and have been living in complex trauma for quite some time, that part of their brain is just so overstimulated, and we see them with anxiety symptoms a lot, depression symptoms a lot. What do we do with those individuals? We try to help them to calm down. Calm down. If a tiger came in here right now, we would all sense it through our senses that there's danger, and we'd be running out of here, or we'd fight, right, to save our lives. So we do things, to save our lives. And when that part of the brain is overstimulated, like I said, we try to teach that part of the brain to calm down. So what does that look like? That looks like when we've gotten out of the way of the tiger. There's no more tiger in the room, no more threat, and our brain naturally calms itself down. But what happens when you take the tiger home with you? What happens when you take the tiger home with you? You're constantly responding to that tiger. Never at peace, correct. So my point is, when that part of the brain is stimulated, this part is not. And this part gives you the opportunity to think. It gives you the opportunity to concentrate. It gives you the opportunity to inhibit, to be organized. But they both can't operate at the same time. Why? One is for survival, only when there's a threat. The other should be your day-to-day functioning, and it requires a lot of brain power. The other one doesn't require a lot. But we want to keep this part going, not the other one, because that means that we're constantly looking for a threat. So individuals who we find that are very emotional, that part of the brain, we're responding through emotions, and emotions can't reason, they can't rationalize, they cannot. You can only reason with clear thinking. So when somebody is experiencing depression and anxiety, trauma memories, they are in that emotional brain. They are not thinking clearly. So their thoughts will sound like, I want to kill myself. I want to die. They want to stop. Yes, the thoughts are not rational. They're irrational. So we have to help them with coping strategies. We have to support them. We have to do whatever we have to do to calm that brain down so that they can use this brain. Okay? So I just wanted to give you that little piece of information. All right. I came off track. There is an unwritten rule that people of faith shouldn't be depressed. But earlier, you told me that's not true, so that's good. We're on the same page. The prevailing idea is that the Christian faith is to be a faith of joy, making depression a sin, which means there's no excuse for a depressed spirit. Not true. And we've seen, even in biblical stories, where many were crushed in spirit, right? But they found strength in prayer, in community, and it wasn't hard. It wasn't easy for many of them. They never described it as, it was serious stuff, right? But they found strength and they found hope through that. And we're promised trials and tribulations. So as a result, depressed people have been riddled with guilt because they feel, remember I told you earlier, we need to perform. We need to put out our best. That's what the world wants from us. So if we're thinking from the perspective of the world, then we're not thinking about ourselves. And I want to shift that. I want to help you to think about yourselves. Do you have a question? Okay. Can you hold it to the end? Because we have a Q&A. All right? All right. So as a result, depressed people have been riddled with guilt. They have been hidden in shame and have been afraid to surface in order to get the help they need. And so these are the things that can lead someone to completing suicide. Okay, I wanted to share the facts with you. I don't know if anybody is aware of this, but these are some of the stories, okay? Mega church pastor and mental health advocate Jared Wilson dies by suicide. Now, he pretty much was open about his struggles, all right? And this was a tweet a couple days before he did complete suicide. And he talked about loving Jesus doesn't always care suicidal thoughts. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure depression. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure PTSD. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure anxiety. But that doesn't mean Jesus doesn't offer us companionship and comfort. He always does that. So, to me, this was a cry for help. He was crying out. He was crying out. He was suffering. He was in the church. Yeah. All right, here's another one. This is a pastor who had fallen from grace. Death of megachurch pastor Darren Patrick officially ruled a suicide. He had fallen from grace. So I talked about, things that would stress us and bring shame on us. And if we're living and operating through shame, there are certain thoughts that we're going to have, and they're not rational. There are certain feelings that we're going to have, and if we stay in that place, they're not helpful. And so, unfortunately, it leads to irrational thinking, poor ways of coping, and this is what he thought, and the other one thought, and all those who have attempted or completed suicide, that's the problem solver. And it's not true. So the cause of his death was a gunshot wound, and the medical examiner ruled it as a suicide. Many of us know Rick Warren, and we know that the family today, they're advocates of mental health. It's personal to them. And their son suffered through, symptoms of depression. And for years, so Pastor Rick Warren blamed son's death on depression, but he also spoke of the years of pain his son suffered with his depression. So people are in pain, guys. I want to tell you that. But they're hiding it because we are supposed to perform according to the world. So just be mindful of that. Depression is real. People are struggling through it. And because of the stigma, some people won't go get the help. And there's help out there, all right? And the help can decrease the symptoms, and learning new coping strategies and ways of thinking and feeling supported also can help somebody. So for 27 years, he had struggled with mental illness. When he was a little boy, he struggled with deep, deep depression. We don't know what happens, in the environment. We also know, so we know that, things that happen in the environment can impact. We also know that there's a genetic link. So when you have all these things and we don't treat these issues, it worsens over time. I'm going to say that again. When we don't treat it, it worsens over time. Doesn't get better. So part of the grief we're dealing with is not just his death, but the grieving over the life. And earlier I said, it impacts our families, our homes, our communities. Everybody is impacted. So whatever we can do to prevent and support someone, let's rise to the cause. Okay, so we have another story, and of course I highlighted pastors, but it's not just pastors. We have congregants. So here's another pastor, but we look to our leaders. So these are shocking news. Pastor who completed suicide, but he battled with manic depression. Today that's called bipolar, okay? Did he tell anybody? I don't know if he did. But like I said earlier, a lot of people don't tell others about their diagnosis because of the perceived stigma. And what happens? They struggle. They struggle. They struggle quietly. This does not have to happen. There's counseling. There's medication. There's support. Okay? So if we can decrease the stigma and support individuals understand that mental illness is real, it would definitely help with decreasing these suicides. And then here we have another pastor who had completed suicide in front of his pleading son, okay? So it affects families, it affects communities. These are pastors. Of course, it's going to affect the congregants, right? So we want to be able to support whoever it is. It doesn't matter. If we can look at each other from one human to another human, not put each other on a pedestal, but connect with each other as one human to another, then we can support each other. Because remember, mental illness, suicidality, it doesn't discriminate. So at this point, with the information that I've given, I'm sure you guys have a better understanding now. Why? Many people ask that question. Why suicide? Why? Okay, the inner struggles, I can't see them because everybody came looking good today. I can't see them if you don't tell me, okay? So let's make our communities, our homes, our conversations more compassionate, more others-centered, where we are aware that not everybody who looks good is doing good, all right? And we can say, it's okay to not be okay. Stop putting out that expectation, but have an understanding that people are struggling. They probably don't want to say anything because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be criticized, and they're ashamed or they're afraid of the stigma, all right? So people have inner struggles. We've all been there. And if we can be honest with each other and say, yeah, I'm not always good all the time. And as humans, if something is upsetting, rightfully so, it's going to trigger an emotion. And guess what? Guys, I'm telling you, it's okay. It's okay. It's natural. You were made that way. If something triggers a happy emotion, I expect that happy response, okay? Yeah, so it's time for us to learn that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. But we got to get the help that we need or give back to ourselves that self-care or go and seek that support when we know we can't do it ourselves in that moment, all right? But we got to make sure the door is always open for others so that they don't feel like they can't come to us. So the inner struggles and the emotional distress experienced by people who ended their lives, struggles of humiliation, pain, shame, and remorse, such as the suicide death of Judas. So there was one in the Bible that we know of, and the context of a suicide we see today is different because people are experiencing emotional distress, which is caused by probably a relationship breakup, socioeconomic stressors. So that means that, some people are having a hard time financially. And over time, it just seems like a struggle to do better. And, other factors. So my thing is, we all have to meet people wherever they are. Let's suspend our judgments, our expectations of people, and let's just hear them out. If that's where they are, let's hear them out. They're there for a reason. All right, so why am I saying that the church should act as first responders? Well, as stewards of the greatest message of hope in history, churches are uniquely positioned to minister to those grappling with thoughts of self-harm. So now we know for a fact that suicide is happening in the church, suicide is happening in our communities, our schools, wherever it's happening. So recognize that people seek hope and they seek strength from their faith communities. So we want to be what? Aware. We want to be tuned into each other. So Not because, like I said, somebody comes to church and they look good means that they are good, all right? So just keep that in mind. Or wherever you are, not because they're presenting good means that they're good. The church is a strong advocate for healing, recovery, love, acceptance, forgiveness, and support. And these are the things that we all need, and these are the things that eradicates shame and guilt. Aside from having a strong faith, the church must recognize that individuals, including our leaders, are affected mind, body, and spiritually, all right? I put that in there because that's how we're made. We're subject to the effects of sin, and we're in constant need of healing and recovery. So if we can recognize that about ourselves, we have no right to judge others, right? It just connects us more as a human to the next human. A Christian perspective on suicide prevention begins with an affirmation of faith that nothing, including suicide, separates us from the love of God. Okay. So why address suicide prevention in the church? Counseling related to suicide fits with the general role of faith community leaders. We are the ones who are encouraging others that there is hope in life, despite whatever it may be. Maybe our life stories alone, we can share, and we can say, you know, I've been in low places. It was for a long time, but through prayer and the support of others, I came out. And now I have a voice to share with you, and I'm speaking life into your life for you to know that this is not the end, right? This is just giving us tools for the next level. So we're a voice of hope, all right? So that's how we encourage others. Our lives, too. We might not be saying, we probably don't have to say anything, but we can model that, you know, we've been in the valley, but, you know, we came to the mountaintop, all right? People with mental health problems, including suicide risk, most of the times, I'm telling you, they're coming to church because they're seeking refuge, all right? And if we look at the church as a sanctuary, a place of recovery for all of us, let us be more mindful and in tune, all right? All right, so people with mental health problems, including suicide risk, they often turn to faith, community leaders for help. So we need to be a first responder, but we got to be equipped. We got to be equipped with hope. Okay? So how can we do this? Well, you're doing it right now. I'm here, right? And I know Dr. Jasmine has brought others, so that's a good thing. Educating, becoming more aware, not shying away, but being bold, right? The best way to prevent suicide is to use a comprehensive approach that includes these key components. Promote emotional well-being. Let us not shame each other for their emotions. Let us not highlight and promote only happy emotions. But if somebody's not feeling well, let's support them, okay? Let's not shame them. Promote emotional well-being and connectedness, all right, among members of your faith community. So we pull from each other because no man is an island, right? We need each other. And let us not ever make individuals feel ashamed when they are being vulnerable. So if somebody is saying, I'm lonely, that let us pull them in. Let's connect with them, all right? So we want to encourage individuals to say, I'm feeling lonely. I need some support. And that's what we're here for, right? Identify people who may be at risk for suicide and assist them with getting help, all all right? And that's what you're doing right here, right now. Be prepared to respond to a suicide threat or a death, because it happens, and provide support to the individual or if someone is a survivor, okay? And like I said, we start off by suspending our judgments. And we are talking about it. And we're talking about it boldly. We're going to minister to those suffering with mental health issues. Suicide prevention should be looked at as a ministry. Okay? How can one help the other? We do it through love, brotherly love. Encourage members to seek professional support. Become familiar with community resources. There are a lot of community resources out there. So let's become familiar with them so we can tell people where to go to find the help that they need. Gain an understanding of mental health struggles, because suicide often reflect deep-seated suffering. All right, increase hope for the suffering. For those wrestling with suicidal thoughts, hope seems an unreachable ideal. The more we connect is the more we increase the hope for that person. When somebody's alone in their problems, that's when they have those negative thoughts. Our concern for mercy translates into a need for compassion rather than condemning. We don't want to condemn anybody. Rather than a condemning response toward those wrestling with thoughts of suicide. So like I talked about earlier, faith has a protective effect against suicide. And church attendance and religious coping have both been linked to a lower risk of suicide. So keep that in mind. And yet research suggests that we can actually do more. So I talk about the triune self. I go back to being physical body, and we have a physical brain, and we have a soul, and that's where we get our word psyche, psychology from. And I see the soul in session all the time. That's the part that is the invisible self, the thoughts and the feelings and the desires. And in counseling, we tell clients, your thoughts are very powerful because they will impact feelings. And a feeling will cause a behavior. If I have a happy thought, I'm going to have a happy feeling. And that behavior may look like a laugh, okay? And vice versa. So we're made in the image of a triune God. God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Balance comes when we are aligned with Him in spirit and in truth. So pretty much, I think that we are saying we want to be balanced. And we're trying a lot of different things. But we talk about well-being. Let's make sure our bodies, we're feeding our bodies, we're exercising, the food that we're eating, it's healthy foods that the nutrition from the food, it's helping our bodies, right? So our soul, what are your thoughts looking like? What are your feelings looking like? Are you tending to them? What are your desires? Many people have desires and they were never fulfilled. And some people feel like they don't have a purpose in life, or they feel like they want to operate through their purpose, but they're not. So these are things that affects people's well-being, their soul. And then the spirit. The spirit, man, we know we connect to God through prayer, through reading the scriptures, and it feeds the spirit and it strengthens us. So we got to make sure that that's where we have our balance. So our souls consist of the invisible self. We are a reflection of our Creator, who is invisible. And our inner self is a constant discovery of ourselves, which allows us to surrender our thoughts, emotions, and desires. Humans have a physical body that suffers from ailments. And the reason I'm stressing this too, and Dr. Jasmine will appreciate me for it, is because Dr. Jasmine works a lot with the brain. And so many people shy away from medication when it comes on to mental illness. But that's a whole nother presentation. but our brain functions off of chemicals. And sometimes there are dysfunctions with the chemicals. And so when there are those dysfunctions with the chemicals in the brain, we're seeing presentations of anxiety, we're seeing presentations of depression, we're seeing presentations of other mental illness. And like I talked about earlier, many people shy away from getting the help because of a diagnosis and so forth, and it only worsens over time. So we have to understand that our brain, just like our kidneys and our hearts, need tending to, all right? So humans have a physical body that suffers from ailments. The brain functions by communicating with chemicals. The brain controls everything in and out of our bodies. What happens when our brains are not functioning at its full potential? Think about that. What happens if it's not functioning the way it is supposed to function? Does our brain suffer from disease like other parts of our bodies? Think about that. Okay. So what's a warning sign? So this is how you're going to be able to help others. Okay, so warning signs is something happening right now. And so that could be somebody expressing to die or to kill themselves. They're displaying withdrawal, isolation, and depression, expressing hopelessness with no reason to live, talking of feeling trapped with no way out, experiencing unbearable pain and wanting relief, talking of being a burden to others and life would be better without them, displaying anger and rage, posting about death, dying, or suicide on social media, demonstrating self-destructive behaviors. So that's something that's happening right now. All right, what's a risk factor? So anything that can increase the chance of something happening. So that we talked about childhood trauma. We talked about the mental health of somebody. Substance use, prolonged stress, access to lethal means. That's a risk factor. We don't want anybody who is thinking about suicide to have access to anything that would allow them to complete suicide. Exposure to another person's suicide or a previous attempt. So these are just some, but they're not all. Okay, and we talked about protective factors, and I stated that faith, the church community, is a protective factor, and that's anything that would decrease the likelihood of somebody completing suicide. So access to mental health care is a protective factor, and being proactive about mental health. So someone prioritizing their mental health, or you supporting someone to get the help. Feeling connected to family and community support. Problem solving and coping skills. Not everyone knows how to solve problems. Not everybody knows how to make good decisions, but they can be taught. And if these skills increase, they are helpful. They decrease stress. So limited access to lethal means, cultural and religious beliefs that encourage connecting and help seeking, discourage suicidal behavior, or create a strong sense of purpose and self-esteem. So I encourage everyone to prioritize your mental health. Do not suffer quietly. Always seek support. All right? How to support others? Ask the question. This is something I want to encourage you to do. To ask the question, be bold about it. You know, say to the person, are you thinking about killing yourself? Be direct. Provide support any way at all that you can. If you don't feel like you're equipped, but you know someone who can support that person, please do. But you standing there, being there in that moment is a form of support. Refer them to seek professional help. Tell someone, I'm sorry you're feeling so badly. How can I help you? Say to them, this is serious. And let the person know that you're taking what they say very seriously and that it warrants immediate attention. And listen. Connect the person with help. If the person is having thoughts about suicide, persuade the person to get the help. Call 1-800-273-TALK. Go to an emergency room if you feel like that's necessary, or call a family member or a counselor. Like I stated earlier, 988 is the easy way today. You can text or you can call. 211 works everywhere, right? 211 is who put on 988. And just always encourage a person to, seek help. Help is available by just reaching out and connecting. And if it's life-threatening, 911, okay? All right, I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, thank you. If you have any questions, this is the time, all right?